100 years ago, there was a very special pond in the middle of the forest where the most bright and vibrant fishes you could imagine lived. It was said that they held a certain magic, that they could grant wishes. But they only did that for humans with a pure heart. However, there was this one man who never had his wish granted. He patiently returned every day for 3 years, but nothing happened. One day, the man came to the pond as usual, but something had changed. His steps were sharp, his eyes black and cold with purpose. No longer did he care for the tranquil water or the rustling trees. He reached into his coat, pulling out a glass veil. The liquid inside glowed, bright and unnatural, throbbing like a heartbeat. Without a moment's pause, he uncorked it, the hiss sharp, and tipped it over the pond. The green poison fell quickly, drop after drop sinking into the water, spreading fast, twisting like veins of darkness. The poison spiraled out swiftly, coiling through the depths, corrupting everything it touched. The water shuddered. Then, silence. The man stood for a moment, watching as the green liquid dissolved into the depth, a grim satisfaction settling over him. Then, without a word, he turned and disappeared into the shadows of the forest, never to return again. Soon the inhabitants of the pond started getting sick, and eventually they lost their ability to grant wishes. The word spread quickly that the pond was cursed, and no human dared to visit it ever again. Today the inhabitants of the pond have lost all their color and forgotten their history, or at least almost all of them have. In one of the fish families, there was a child born with a bright purple tail. Her parents did their best to raise her, but she was very difficult. She could be joyful for no reason, and she only wanted to paint with bright colors, which made her parents very concerned, as all the other children only chose black, brown, and grey. That's how she got her name, Joy, a name to mark her as the demon she was. The other children would chase her relentlessly, snapping at her tail, laughing as they circled around her, calling her names. Some would flick mud in her face, mocking her for trying to swim away. Others would refuse to let her play with them. Desperate to fit in, Joy tried everything. She smeared her beautiful tail with clay, hoping to dull the brightness. But the water always washed it away. She rubbed her tail raw against the rocks, trying to scrape off the purple, but only succeeded in hurting herself. One day, while she was in the shallow waters near the edge, her tail aching from all her efforts to remove the color, a human appeared from the forest. Joy's heart raced with fear, but she was too hurt, too tired to swim away. The human, an old woman with kind eyes, knelt by the water's edge. Her movements were slow and gentle. "Let me help you," she said softly. Joy wanted to refuse, but as she glanced back, she saw the others hiding behind a rock, laughing at her. It couldn't get worse, she thought. She was so tired. With a final broken sigh, she gave in. The woman reached down. Her hands were soft and warm, and lifted Joy carefully from the water. As she placed her in a bucket filled with clear, soothing water, the weight of the pond seemed to fall away. For the first time in a long time, Joy felt safe, and she drifted into a peaceful sleep. Joy woke up suddenly, finding herself being pulled down by the water into a new world. Where was she? She couldn't tell. And green smoke was hissing from her gills. Her fins slashed through the water. This didn't feel right. A shadow closed in. It was huge, and it was coming fast. But was it coming for her? She set off in the opposite direction, bolting and slamming through the water as faces whipped by. She could hear shouts and insults coming like missiles. Her tail kicked up mud, swirling into a thick fog, and she dove into an opening under a rock, hiding in the cover of the dust. And then she stopped. The next day, she woke up to a pair of big, curious eyes, looking deep into hers. "Are you coming? Come on, silly." "What?" Joy asked. "It starts soon. Come on." "What starts soon?" "The festival, silly, where fish from all over the world come together to dance and play. It's the event of the year. What's your name?" I'm Joy." "Nice to meet you, Joy. I'm Finn. And now we have to hurry." He blinked and signaled her to follow. As they approached a very crowded area, she stayed close to Finn. He smiled at her. She had never seen so many colorful and beautiful creatures in her life. "It's us," he said, and dove into a passing school of dancers. It wasn't until after the festival that she realized how much lighter and more peaceful she felt, and how much clearer she could think. Finn's presence calmed her, an unfamiliar warmth settling within her. But a weight remained. She knew she belonged here, in these clear waters, where every movement felt right. And yet something tugged her back. The memory of murky waters, of those she left behind. Should she stay and let herself be swept up in the freedom she had never known, or return to try and save them? She closed her eyes. The decision came, quiet but resolute. The next day, Finn and the old woman waited for her. They wanted to accompany her on her journey back home. When they got close to the old pond, the atmosphere started changing. An almost unbreathable fog laid over the surface. It was almost like time had stood still and the water was barely moving. She knew that she couldn't stay for long. She quickly gathered everyone, telling them about her journey, what was out there, and that their pond was poisoned. But what she thought would be hopeful faces were now frowning. Who do you think you are, coming back here saying how we should live? Do you think that you're better than us? That you know more about life now that you're living in your fancy new home? We've never been good enough for you, huh? Before, those words would have hurt her deeply, but for some reason, her old bullies looked more sad than intimidating now. And now she had to go. The time was up. She could already feel the green water penetrating her skin. And she couldn't help but think that maybe they were right. Maybe she was delusional for thinking that the new pond was better. But when she saw Finn and the old woman in the corner of her eye, she knew she wasn't. "One last thing before I let you go," the old woman said. "I was wondering if you could do something for me." "Yes, anything," Joy replied. "I want to know where the antidote to the poison is, where my grandfather put it 100 years ago." "Your grandfather? How could I ever do such a thing?" Joy asked, perplexed. "Oh, you can," she said and winked at Joy, and then poured Finn and Joy into their new home for the last time. The next day, the old woman returned to the poisoned pond with a new glass vial. She put it next to the pond with a note saying, "You didn't choose to get poisoned, but you have to choose to heal." And then she walked away.